Hi, and thanks for joining us. You're watching the Welcome Home Report, your source for homeownership mentoring and education. I'm your host, Deborah Gilbert, and today we're going to take a look in the wealth building arena, and we're going to talk specifically about wealth building and planning. Now, planning is a very important element in building wealth, and one of the things that we should do is in our portfolios or our strategies and the things that we're doing in our journey of owning our own homes and building wealth is to give ample time and consideration to the planning of what we have in terms of our wealth, holding on to the wealth, and just having a safekeeping and understanding some of the resources and tools that are available to us in the wealth building process. Before I introduce my guest, let me offer this disclaimer. While it is the mission of the Welcome Home Report to offer general information, the topic today that we're going to talk about is living trusts. And by that very topic, it is a legal topic in its nature, but it is not our intention to render specific legal advice or consultation to your unique situation. We don't really have a way to know what your unique needs will be. But our premise and our goal is to render and to deliver general information that is designed to stimulate thinking, raise awareness and visibility of the resources that are available in your communities to help you in your journey of owning your own home and building wealth. Now, that being said, let me introduce my guest. Caprice L. Collins. She is an attorney at law based in Southern California. She has 3 offices in Southern California that she renders services to her local community. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She is a Harvard Law School graduate. She has been practicing estate planning for over 26 years. She's been recognized by her peers and her community. In fact, recently we learned that she was acknowledged and recognized by the California State Assembly for her outstanding work and contributions to her community in raising $2.5 million in estate planning services through her practice. So hopefully she'll tell us a little bit about that, but we want to certainly acknowledge that as being a part of her background. Caprice, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Deborah, for having me here today.
You're welcome. Caprice, you and I were talking in the last several weeks as we've been talking and creating this topic of understanding living trusts and talking about wealth building and the importance of planning. One of the things I shared with you was my concern, and you and I have shared in a common ground in our respective fields, where we've noticed a common trend that there are many families who appear to not have, for lack of a better word, like their house in order in terms of what's happening with the distribution of their wealth. We see celebrity headlines grabbing at our attention daily over families who are fighting and bickering over wealth that has been built by someone who's passed on, and it's leaving families in disarray. We open up our newspapers and we find in the legal notices that many families, their homes are being subject to the probate process. So you're here as our area and industry expert. Tell us about living trusts. How is that a tool or a resource to help a person planning in their endeavors to build their wealth?
Well, first of all, let me just say that living trust is just one strategy we have in the overall area of estate planning. And estate planning is basically making sure that whatever we have, whatever we've been able to acquire through our lifetimes is there to protect us in the case of us being incapacitated, having some kind of physical or mental disability, or upon our death being efficiently transferred to whomever and whatever we might so desire.
Okay. Perfect. Excellent. So, and a lot of times, would you find, or would you say it's common that most people probably don't put as much effort into the planning process because a part of the element of planning, it deals with an element that many of us don't like to talk about. We don't like to talk about disability, we don't like to talk about taxes and death, because it means that, we have to really address some of those issues. Is that a fair assumption?
Definitely. And Deborah, what I find is that people are very interested in acquiring wealth. And I want to congratulate you for taking your time to educate the community as you do with this wonderful program and with all the things that I know you do.
Thank you.
And so many of us are learning from you and from others about how to acquire wealth. What we haven't learned is how do we keep it? How do we keep it if we had a sudden disability and all of a sudden needed someone else to manage our affairs? And how do we keep it within our own family structure when we have the inevitable happen to us, which is to pass on? It's going to happen to everybody. So for us to deny the fact that that's the path that life provides for all of us is just an unwise way of handling those things that happen to us in our lives. And certainly no one likes to think about it, but it's inevitable. It's inevitable for everyone's life, and so we have to give some attention to that process.
Right, right. You published a guide from one of your educational seminars that you teach, and I attended a class a while back, and in that guide was a very interesting set of statistics. My question is going to go to probate. Tell us, what is probate? I think understanding what probate is really helps to set the foundation and the stage, and really showcases in and of itself why it's so important to a state plan. One of the statistics in your resource guide showed a list of estates of very significant holdings. What it started out before a person, you know, at the time that they could measure the net worth of the estate. But after going through a probate process, I saw statistics that showed me estates were reduced 30, 40, 60%. How does that happen? And is that a reflection of an estate winding up in probate because there's no document that gave instruction on how the assets or the wealth was to be distributed upon a person's passing?
Well, let me start with the first issue, and that is about probate. And probate is a state process that basically happens to anyone who doesn't plan. So the reality is that everyone watching this program today, if they are an adult, there is an estate plan out there for them. It's either the one that they've made for themselves, or it's the one that the state in which they live has made for them.
Oh, wow.
There's only two options.
Wow.
And so if we don't take the effort to make our own plan, then the probate system, and it might be called an estates system in a different state, but it's a system that the state has a code that they have already decided how our estate would be distributed, even if we didn't want it to be distributed that way. In many states, the cost of this system is extremely high. And for instance, in California, the cost is about 25%. So that means that 25% of the gross value of someone's estate will be lost if they fail to make a plan. Now, that's just really a minimum, because if we have a situation like might have been highlighted in some of those celebrity estates that you're talking about, where families and where people fought over the assets, then the actual cost can be way more than that. And where we'll have situations where actually, after all of the expenses are paid, there's really nothing to distribute to the family.
Right, right. Not to mention, you know, just not that we could put really a dollar value on what happens on the non-monetary side of that whole issue. You know, you have strained family relationships, the stress and the time and the energy taken to have to, you know, see those legal proceedings through. So to me, on the flip side of the coin would be certainly it measures that, you know, it's very important to definitely have a plan in place. I like the idea of being able to have my plan in place versus the one that the state may have for me. Okay.
Well, now, when you talk about those other areas that should be of concern to us, like the grief that we leave behind, this is something that unfortunately, when we love someone and we care for them, we're going to naturally feel a loss. But our families can actually make it worse by having family members have to fight each other over assets, by there being indecision, by people not having made plans for, so say, their final rites or what would happen to them in a terminal illness. We've all heard of the story, I believe, of Terri Schiavo, the young woman in Florida that unfortunately at a very young age had a life condition, a heart attack that rendered her incapable, really brain dead. And the fact that her family fought over her for 15 years.
Right.
All of that could have been avoided by one simple estate planning document, which some states we call a living will, and other states we call a healthcare directive. And so estate planning is not just about what happens to us when we pass away. It may also be about what happens to us when we've had a serious illness, when we've had an incapacity.
Right. And that brings up a good point. I'm glad you mentioned that, because what we try to teach in terms of owning your own home and building wealth, when we really hang out in the arena of wealth, we too try to define wealth beyond money. You know, not just real estate, not just the land and homes that we are acquiring through a real estate process, but wealth as being part of, or defined as, quality of life, peace of mind. You know, some of the